Williams to inbound. Simpson with it for the lead. Oh! 1.7. Long shot. Good as it goes. Colorado wins. The Buffaloes have won.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Basketball in the Mountains. This is episode 69. I am your host, as always, Tyler King, here to talk all things hoops in the Mountain Time Zone. And today we are getting back to talking college hoops. And as you can guess by the intro video, we're talking about the Colorado Buffaloes. We haven't really done a kind of deep dive on this team in quite some time. I think we talked about them, back in December ahead of the Rocky Mountain Showdown against Colorado State. I've kind of mentioned them in passing in solo episodes that I've done about just kind of games that I've been to. That's a pretty good time to catch up on the Buffs and kind of where they are at this point of the season. We'll talk the Big 12 as a whole. With 2 weekends left before the big, or left in the regular season before the Big 12 tournament. Some key injury news around the conference this week, one of which is significant to the teams we cover here on the podcast. Obviously, we did our episode on BYU last week, leading into that BYU Colorado game, and very early in that game, Richie Saunders for the Cougars suffers a torn ACL and is out for the season. So we'll talk about that and a lot more on the show today. Not going to be talking too much Mountain West. Probably get into that next week. Just a little bit of a programming note on that. I will be at Colorado State versus San Diego State tomorrow. Or I'm not sure when everyone's listening to this, but on Saturday's game against San Diego State in Moby, I will be at that game, and then we'll be seeing both the Rams and the Buffs in action in the middle of next week as well. So without further ado, to help us talk about not just the Buffs, but the Big 12 as a whole, is our good friend Oliver Hayes from 247 Sports and BuffStampede. Oliver, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. We always love having you on to talk Buffs, because you're one of the few people that goes to more Buffs games than I do, and is at more practices than I am. You and Pat Rooney from the Boulder Daily Camera are the two people that are always there when I show up. So I know you guys are there when I'm not there. So this Colorado team, obviously 14-12 right now, 4-9 in the Big 12. Not an overly exciting record or anything like that, but I think just kind of the way this season has gone, there's been ups and downs for this young squad, but I think you're starting to figure out who Tad Boyle really trusts and believes in kind of going forward. Like, I think there's a core 4 of guys right now with Isaiah Johnson, Barrington Hargress, Sebastian Ronchik, and Benny Dak that are kind of, those are the guys Tad is relying on every kind of given game. And then you're looking for 2 or 3 guys outside of that to kind of make an impact. And Colorado she plays Oklahoma State tomorrow on Saturday at 1:30 up in Boulder. Like I said, we'll not be at that game, but Buffs actually had a long break after their BYU game last week. They had the little bit of the mini bye week this week. One of the most impressive road performances of the season, probably the most impressive road performance of the season, falling to BYU in overtime. Had a bunch of chances to win that game, not just in regulation, but at the end of it in overtime as well. Like I said, BYU shorthanded, losing Richie Saunders early, but Colorado led for almost 10 minutes of that game. They led a decent chunk in the second half. So just sorry for rambling there, Oliver. Just kind of what has been your take of this team over the last couple of weeks and months as they've kind of made their way through Big 12 play here? Obviously, they're better than they were last year in terms of record, with being 4-9 in the Big 12 after going 3-15 last year, but still a little bit of some missed opportunities here and there for this squad.
Yeah, well, I think the 2 big things that we kind of all expected heading into the season to change was the ball security, the lack of turnovers that the team is having this year in comparison to last year is night and day. That makes it seem so much more watchable and puts them in so many more games. Where I feel like last year's team had, even though they didn't have as much of the star power, which I talk about in a sec, they just turned the ball over so darn much that it was really.
They did not have like one capable ball handler on that team. That was the biggest issue. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So to see not only Barrington Hargress come in and do what he's done, but especially Isaiah Johnson, you've asked Tad about it multiple times, but the way that he's getting blitzed out of ball screens and stuff like that, yet still keeping his dribble alive to get the rest of his teammates involved has been very impressive, and probably the biggest thing that has stood out to me with this team. But the other thing I'd say that's been the big difference is the star power that has come along with Barrington, Isaiah, and scoring the ball. I know Sebi hasn't necessarily had the year that I expect. I hyped him up a lot more, probably more than some other people following the team. But still, the amount of shot making that you can get, even from some of the reserves, you can see, Jalen Holland or Josiah Saunders occasionally gets the rim for a tough finish or an and one or something like that. And so I guess the reason I'm talking about those two things is that when things started to go bad last year, there wasn't really any sort of optimism that things would get better. It seemed like kind of what you saw on January 1st is what you were going to get on March 1st. And it wasn't really until Sebastian Ranchik had that game against Kansas last year that things really started to look up. And while the road losses were bad and things have definitely been a little bit tough amid the starting lineup switch with the freshmen, I think it's very impressive that this team can lose three road games in a row by 19 or more points, get absolutely killed by the home crowd, by the opposing team, not really look like they're in any game, and then come back and play in BYU and really show their resiliency and show that they can compete, with a ranked team on the road with a highly respected home environment, even though, you can take that game with a grain of salt due to the Richie Saunders injury. I just thought the resiliency and the fact that you don't necessarily feel that they're out of a game at this point in the season due to the star power and what they look like at this point is just a whole lot more optimistic. You don't have the apathy that you have towards this team that you felt last year whenever things started going bad, even though they started putting games together at the end of the season. So
yeah, that was just more of a veteran team last year. Obviously, you had guys like Sebastian and Bangot playing key roles, but other than that, and Felix Caceres a little bit, although he's fallen out of the rotation recently this season. You're kind of this season is a little bit different because, like you said, there's a lot of freshman star power and guys that are coming back. Like Barrington Hargis has another year of eligibility. Obviously, Isaiah Johnson is a freshman. Sebastian's only a sophomore. Bangot's only a junior. You mentioned Jalen Holland and Josiah Saunders, so I want to talk about obviously their freshmen. Taco Ifala has kind of gotten some more run here too as a freshman big man. So you can see this team kind of growing in real time, which is kind of, like you said, the biggest difference. Because even though they played so well last week at BYU, it came like 3 days after one of the more famous Tad rants after their blowout loss at Texas Tech, where he basically told the team, he basically said he wished he could put the team on a commercial flight back to Boulder and not take the chartered plane that they didn't deserve. A little bit different than Jerome Tang's. They didn't deserve to wear the uniform, which kind of got him fired at Kansas State. But Tad was basically saying after that blowout loss to Texas Tech that he didn't want it. He felt basically embarrassed to take the charter flight back after performance like that. I'm not sure if Tad wants to try to make multiple connections, getting to Lubbock, flying out of Lubbock and trying to get back to Denver, because there's not a whole lot of direct flights there. But anyway, regardless, like I said, this is a really young team, and you can like you said, you can kind of see them growing in real time. And Tad is really kind of leading into this youth effort. You've seen multiple games in the last month or so where it's 4 freshmen starting alongside Barrington Hargis. Now they've kind of, like I said, they've kind of found a starting 5 of Isaiah, Barrington, Sebastian Bangot, and Jalen Holland a little bit, who's I think is at a really, really promising last month or so. It's just interesting to see kind of how this season has evolved and the guys that have kind of worked their way into the rotation and have become key contributors. Is there anybody that maybe has surprised you with how much they've contributed or how little they've contributed at this point of the season? I think we all kind of expected Isaiah, with everything we heard throughout the summer and on the Australia trip, that he was going to have a big freshman season. And obviously they brought Barrington here to have to play a big role, but it seems like everybody else after that is kind of hit or miss at times, or has had good stretches and bad stretches.
Yeah, I think Sebastian Ranchik, like I talked about earlier with my high expectations for him, I thought that he was going to be the number one option for the Buffs entering the season, just with his skill set combined with his height and how well he moves. Everyone sees that right away and respects that immediately. So I thought he was going to be a little bit more of an offensive weapon, at least scoring the ball. I thought he's made decent steps as a playmaker and getting some more of his teammates involved. But in terms of scoring the ball, I thought he was going to make a little bit more of a jump, at least from the perimeter. And you kind of see, like, at times where you can where he's a really good driver, and that's what people want to see the most. But you can kind of see at times where he can tell that, he's so skilled where he may fade away or something, or take a little bit of a harder shot than he expects. So I'd say out of everyone who, yeah, I'd say for on the lower end or on the surprise on the lower side, Sebastian Ranchik was probably stands out, but not necessarily in a bad way too, because I feel like his defense has taken some strides when you look at the Devonta game, but you also look at the first Texas Tech meeting, and he's guarding Chris Anderson for most of that second half. So he's kind of surprised me in a number of ways. He's come alive rebounding the basketball, but I'd say probably the biggest surprise after him in a good way would probably be Jalen Holland. And it's not necessarily like the reliance on him is surprising or what he's done has been surprising, because he's doing a lot of the same things that you could see in his high school tape. He got the start versus the Australian men's national team over the summer, so there was obviously some trust in him, even over some of the returning guys like Andrew Crawford and Felix Casares. But still, that trust has remained consistent, which has been impressive to me, because at times Jalen can be kind of a streaky player.
Yeah.
On both sides of the floor, you can see sometimes he misses some defensive assignments, whether it's ball screen coverage or getting back on defense or whatever. Sometimes on offense, he'll take a three, and you're like, I can't believe he's ever made a 3-point shot before, because he has some horrid misses. But then, like Tad has said multiple times throughout the season, he has the memory of a goldfish. If he doesn't even necessarily have to be open on the next possession, he'll put up that three, and it has just as good of a chance to go in as the last one. So, he's been very impressive to me, and been better than I expected, just in terms of the reliance on him and the way that he can impact a game, even when you aren't necessarily expecting him to. He'll grab a rebound off of a missed free throw like he did against BYU. He'll go flying into a front row to save a loose ball. He's probably been the biggest surprise expectations wise in a good way.
Yeah, I would say I would agree with that wholeheartedly, because I was not sure what his role was going to be coming into the season. Like I just wasn't sure like if he was going to be able to cut it offensively, and get the minutes I needed to. I thought maybe Ian Inman as just a spacer and just a pure knockdown shooter would play more of a role for this team maybe as a freshman, but they've need everything Jalen has given in the last month or so, especially defensively. And just his willingness to kind of do the little things and compete. I remember Tad Boyle talking at some point in January just about having individual meetings with players and talking to them about how can they impact this team, right now, and not how they can impact the team in 2 or 3 years when obviously their skill sets evolve and they develop into more mature players. It can have a larger role, but I think Jalen's kind of really bought into everything he needs to do as a freshman to kind of get on the floor, and that's why he started 4 games here lately, and it's kind of been a key player, getting a lot of minutes in a lot of these games as well. So that's been nice to see from that perspective, because obviously they've needed someone to step up outside of like Isaiah and Barrington and Sebastian and Banga, kind of the core 4 guys that I mentioned earlier, that this program kind of wants to build around going into next season. That's kind of what I wanted to get to next. Obviously, there are 5 games left in the regular season before the Big 12 tournament. Colorado right now would be obviously they're going to be playing on the first day of the Big 12 tournament. Like, they're not going to be a top 8 team. They're not even going to get a single bye. But I think there is a chance for them to move up and out of the bottom 4, where you're kind of getting to play one of the bottom 4 teams on day 1 and have a better chance to advance at least on the first day of the tournament. Obviously, they're tied for. They're tied for 12th right now or tied for 13th right now with Oklahoma State, who they play tomorrow, like I said, and they're only 2 games back of TCU, who's up there in 10th place in Cincinnati. And I do think there is a chance for Colorado to go 3-2 down the stretch here. Obviously, they've got the road game at Houston coming up next week, and then they play Arizona to close the season. But there's some other winnable games in there as well for this team if they continue to play like they did last week against BYU, which we haven't seen enough of that, which is why they're 4-9. But I was just curious, like, what your take is on how this team what this team's outlook is going forward, not just the rest of the season, but the future as well. Obviously, everything in college basketball these days is kind of dependent on who you can keep and who you can afford to keep. And obviously, the guys like Isaiah Johnson have really flashed this year. But it seems like, at least from my conversations with all of the freshmen throughout the season and even dating back to the summer, that they all want to be a part of kind of what this program is building going forward. And I think there is kind of more internal optimism about being able to keep these guys. Cause like I said, there is only one senior on this roster, and Elijah Malone, who's going to be for sure gone next season. And obviously there are going to be guys that I think are inevitably going to transfer. Like that's going to happen. Guys that have maybe fallen out of favor this season and just don't really have as much of a role going forward. But there is a solid 6, 7, 8 group of 8 guys that I think Tad really wants to build around, because you look around college basketball and older teams tend to win. And now you got to develop those guys and kind of bring them in, or you can pay for them in the transfer portal, which Colorado just is not going to be able to do. Just again, I'm rambling, but just kind of what is your outlook? What is your outlook on this team kind of going forward the rest of this season and kind of into next season as well?
Yeah, for the rest of the season, you mentioned 3-2, and I think that's the most likely record that the Buffs will finish in these last 5 games. I think that Utah, I mean, they're last place in the Big 12 for a reason, so I don't think the
Utah did finally get a win, though. They won for the first time in over a month earlier this week. They won at West Virginia, which was kind of surprising, but yeah.
Yeah, no, at West Virginia is surprising, given that West Virginia had like the longest home Big 12 like consecutive win streak or whatever. But I think even though that game will be on the road, the Colorado versus Utah game will be on the road. I think Colorado can handle that game. Arizona versus Houston, I feel like that's pretty obvious. But Kansas State, after Jerome Tang was gone, that was gonna be pretty easy. Of course, they've gotten to win, so that would be a toss-up.
You got to take care of that game at home, regardless of kind of who's coaching or playing in that game. Yeah,
definitely. I'm not saying that there's any excuse, but maybe they'll be a little surprising. But Oklahoma State, I think of all the games, that's the one I feel the least certain about, just because of the Cowboys' offensive star power. I mean, Anthony Roy, he can score the ball, but they have a number of other dudes who can score it. But it's my turn to ramble.
They're a very volatile team as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it was my turn to ramble real quick on the pod about stuff that doesn't matter too much, because I know we care a lot more about how the Buffs are going to retain their talent and going into next year. And I think that you brought up the good points that I'll probably harp on and just echo a little bit is that the freshmen and all the other guys seem happy where they are. I don't think any of these guys outside of, maybe you look at Isaiah and see,
I think Sebastian Ronchik is a guy to watch. I think for sure. Like, I think he's the one guy that I think, I remember him telling me last summer, like he's kind of like in a year-to-year mindset right now. So he's a guy I would definitely keep an eye on, but the rest of the young guys, I would feel pretty confident. I mean, I don't know. Isaiah Johnson is he's not really a guy that seems like he's after money bags. I mean, he's not really a guy it just doesn't seem like the way he was raised. So he's the guy I'm less worried about, to be honest, than more like a guy like Sebastian Ronchik, who you want to keep because you've seen the development over his first 2 years, and you feel like he could become into that star player that you thought he might become, and I thought he might become at points this year. I still think that guy's in there. So he's maybe the one freshman / sophomore I would be worried about losing.
Yeah, because what I was about to say is with the rest of with the freshmen and not even the sophomores or there's some of the returning guys, like when you look at the offers that a lot of those guys had in outside of Isaiah, they had some other places to go to. They had some other options, and that I feel like that really feeds into what you said about them enjoying their situation and feeling like they're in the right spot. Is I don't think that they came into the situation not knowing what was going to happen. This season. And so, I feel like Sebastian Ronchik is a good player to bring up. I think the thing that stands out to me with him is just that makes it so hard to guess about where he is that he's so, I don't know if it's like a culture thing, like being from that part of the world, because they're a little bit more like closed off in like Eastern Europe, but it's so hard to tell exactly, like, I don't know, just what he's thinking. Out of all the players that I've talked to, like, he seems to be the most like I can't crack his shield at all in terms of what he's thinking. I feel like at times he would run through. I feel like he'll run through a wall for Tad, but at times,
Yeah, when he got benched last month a little bit, he wasn't too happy about that. He made that pretty clear in one of the post games.
Yeah, and I was the one that asked him about it. He seemed a little mad, and I was like, and so I don't know. It's hard because you can see how frustrated Sebi gets on the court just in the moment at himself, and so. I'd say
he also really is a guy that takes pride in doing well and cheering on his teammates. So you're right. He's a very difficult guy to read, but he's the one guy that I would kind of keep an eye on going into the offseason, because there's going to be, like I said, there's going to be transfers. Like, that's going to happen every offseason. There's going to be 2, maybe 3, even 4 guys that leave the program, even after a season of progress for this team. It's just going to happen. But I just, Sebastian is the one guy I would kind of keep an eye on to see what he does in the offseason, because if he sticks around, then I would be really confident in kind of everybody that you really want to keep around sticking around. It's kind of like, maybe Isaiah is the glue piece. I don't know. People just kind of see him committing to the program, and wanting to stick around, and that makes everybody else want to stay. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens this offseason, because Tad has been saying it since October that they gotta they gotta do everything they can to keep this young core intact, because they believe in it so heavily, and they think it can become they envision it becoming kind of what that KJ Simpson, Tristan Da Silva team, obviously we have the intro video from that NCAA tournament run, becoming that. Like, I think they have that kind of aspiration to become maybe even having a higher seed in the NCAA tournament and being a real threat to make the Sweet 16. I think they believe that this core can be that next year, or maybe not next year, but the year after that, and just kind of adding supplemental pieces to that as well. But there's a core of 4 to 5 or 6 freshmen / sophomores that you can really build around here, and they're not going to be able to keep them all together. That's just inevitable. But it's going to be a really, really fascinating offseason once it comes.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the one thing that I want to talk about is the glue guy part that you mentioned between Sebastian and Isaiah, between between the two of them, who would be more likely to retain more players based on whether they stay or left. And for me, I feel like Isaiah is more likely to be that guy.
I think it's for sure Isaiah.
That
Yeah, just with
indicates
his
whether or
connection
not
to the
they stay.
freshmen,
Yeah.
with his connection to the rest of the freshman class.
And I feel like him as well, like, with the offers thing, like, he didn't have the opportunities to go elsewhere. So since everything will be open for him, he can really go into any situation that he wants, given the type of freshman year that he's had. I think that will be even more of an indicator than Sebi, because even though Sebi has been playing well, and has still been a productive player even through the ups and downs, I feel like even any move he would make would kind of be a parallel move. I don't necessarily see him going to a team at the same level in the Power 4 and somehow finding, unless he's going purely for money bags, or trying to win. I don't necessarily see him.
He's not going to have the same
seeing more
role
touches or anything
somewhere
like
else.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like Isaiah is probably the dude that has the most to gain from the transfer portal, and I feel like that's why it's not arguable to see that he's the biggest to retain, but in terms of like that glue guy status of keeping all those dudes together, I think he's probably the biggest one, especially when you see all the, like you said, the freshman connections. You see, like, he's the one posting on TikTok and stuff with all the, the teammates and things that, all those little things that you might not think about. He seems to be the one leading it. So I feel like, he'd probably stand out a little bit more, but obviously both those guys are huge and maintaining, because a guy like Sebi would be a whole lot harder to replace.
Yeah, I think so, for sure. You have to keep me updated on what's going on the Buff side of TikTok, because I don't know, I must be missing that side TikTok. I try to avoid it a little bit, but anyway, let's move on. Just talk a little bit about the rest of the Big 12 as a whole here. Like I said at the top of the show, it's been a very interesting week in the Big 12. Obviously Arizona beat BYU to complete the season sweep of them. Arizona was shorthanded as well in that game. No Koa Pete, no Dwayne Aristote, who was out with an illness. Koa Pete is not a season-ending injury. Seems like he'll be back in a week or so, but still obviously a big loss for Arizona in that game. They were kind of able to pull away late to kind of keep BYU from pulling off a little bit of an upset there. But like I said, Richie Saunders out for the year with an ACL. JT Toppin, the reigning Big 12 Player of the Year, out for the season with an ACL. He suffered on Tuesday in that game where they lost at Arizona State, which is a really stunning result in the conference. Just what have you made of these major injuries this week, and kind of how it's affected how you feel about the Big 12 with, like I said, 2 weeks ago in the regular season, because it felt like there was a group of 6 at the top of the Big 12 that had really established itself as not just Big 12 title contenders, but Final Four and national title contenders, with all these teams fully healthy, feeling like they could make their way to the Final Four. Now Texas Tech and BYU, who knows, but just kind of where are you at with the Big 12 as a whole at this point of the year with a little over a week left here in February?
Yeah, I guess starting with the injuries, BYU, of course, Richie Saunders, he's one of my favorite players across the Big 12.
Yeah. I
I
loved
feel like
watching him last year. Yeah.
I feel like everyone can probably agree with that. Just a very super fun player to watch. So very tough to see him go down. And obviously everyone understands the implications that injury has on that BYU team. But obviously heading into that Colorado game, they had lost 5 of their last 7, I believe it was. They had been struggling, and the big thing that stood out to me about this conference is the front court, which is obviously then why the JT Toppin injury is so crucial. On top of him, being the Big 12 player of the year, the reigning Big 12 player of the year. So, to lose the conference's best player is tough, but especially a front court player. And I think that's what will make the big difference for those top 6, probably now top 4 teams that you mentioned. Because when I look at Arizona and what makes them so special to me is you look at their front court and their starters, and they're already solid, potential Big 12 defensive player of the year. And then you have Toby Awaka coming off the bench and able to wreak havoc. And it's just so like I don't know. It's just so suffocating, I guess. And especially for the opposing centers that have to play across the Big 12 and bang with 2 guys who are, very capable, promising, or not promising, but very 2 capable bigs, where Toby Awaka would start on any other team in the Big 12.
He did start for Arizona almost all last year. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you even look at some of the other players. Like, I don't know how many people are necessarily looking out for Anthony Del Orso. Who
also started a lot last year for Arizona.
But yeah, exactly, same type of situation. And so I feel like Arizona, just with their depth, their front court skill and depth there, I think that's what makes them stand out the most. And then yeah, from there, then it's kind of a toss up, because I look at Kansas. I like their height. Darren Peterson is fantastic. I think they have a lot of energy, yeah. But yeah, when he plays, I don't. And then, after Badunga, they don't necessarily have as much of that front court depth. I feel like the team really relies on Badunga when watching them. So if teams game plan for them, Kansas doesn't have as much of a workaround as Arizona. And I don't know. I mean, I guess, at this point, I'm kind of rambling. I'm going to talk about Houston, Iowa State, but Houston, I like them. I feel like they don't have as much of the depth that they had last year. And Iowa State, I mean, they're always scary, but going back to that front court thing, I like Blake Buchanan and what he does. Josh Jefferson is obviously a fantastic player, but in terms of just that physicality, that banging around just on a one-on-one sense, I feel like Iowa State doesn't have it as much. So I guess out of everyone, and you didn't ask a specific question, but out of everyone, my favorite pick is Arizona. And then my other reasonings, you can guess how my picks fall, how they may, I guess.
Yeah, I think the injuries, even though Arizona has a little bit of them of their own, I think the injuries have been good for Arizona, because I think Texas Tech and BYU are both teams that I think could have given Arizona troubles, whether it's in KC for the Big 12 tournament, or even beyond if they somehow met at any point in the NCAA tournament. But yeah, I think Arizona is still pretty firmly the number 1 team in the conference for me. Obviously, they have a huge game tomorrow at Houston, which we're going to learn a lot about both these teams, in a top 5 matchup, 1 o'clock Mountain Time, ABC kind of game. It just really has all the makings of a really special game, because Houston obviously is coming off a loss too. Like you mentioned, they lost at Iowa State on Monday, and that was a pretty crazy game where Houston led for a decent amount of it, but Iowa State kind of stormed back late and kind of stole that one with some Hilton magic there. And Kansas is really interesting because, like you said, the Darren Peters thing has gotten weirder and weirder with his playing time or lack. Whether it's Melvin Council or Floyd Badunga, who I think has had an awesome season for Kansas. He's definitely a guy that I would consider for Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. Bryson Tiller's had a really good season. Like, they've been getting production from all of their kind of veteran guys around Darren Peterson as well. And I think they're definitely a team I could see kind of going on a run in KC to win it all there. So I do agree with you. Like, I think it has become a Big Four at this point. Like, I think the JT Toppin injury is just so detrimental for Texas Tech, and not just this. It's such a bummer because it felt like, I mean, they were so close to making the Final Four last year. They were a couple minutes away from beating Florida in the Elite Eight, the eventual national champions, and making the Final Four in San Antonio. And I felt like they were at a really good shot to get back there this year with how much Christian Anderson has improved as a sophomore. He's one of my favorite players in the conference. Lawan Watts is a great player as well, and they've got some complementary pieces, some shooters that to surround those guys. And if they get hot, like, it's kind of over for you. BYU, I was always a little bit skeptical of because of how reliant they were on Rob Wright, AJ DeBanza, and Richie Saunders as that big three. And it was like, if one of those guys goes down, they're really screwed. And now that's kind of what we're seeing with BYU. So obviously they were able to win their first game against Colorado without Richie, but it'll be interesting to see how they do tomorrow against Iowa State at home. That's kind of the late night game to cap off a really, really fun slate of games in the Big 12. But it's going to be interesting to see what this conference and what the standings and the bracket kind of look like, because I think it's very matchup dependent, this conference. And kind of who is going to be able to go on a run. Like, maybe there's a team from that group in the middle of the pack there, whether it's like TCU or Cincinnati or even like West Virginia, like UCF. Like, there's these streaky teams in the middle there. Even Arizona State or Colorado, Oklahoma State. There's these teams that are really streaky that I think could win a couple games, and it wouldn't surprise anybody. So it's going to be a really, really fun conference tournament in KC for sure, which I know you'll be at. I'm hoping maybe to make it out there for that as well. But this conference has kind of lived up to the hype this season. It kind of be overtaking the SEC as the best, the deepest, and I think the most talented top end conference in the country for sure. I'm sure you agree with that.
Yeah, I thought that in comparison to last year, that the lower teams in this conference feel a whole lot more dangerous.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a big thing that stood out. And then, well, I feel like at some of the higher teams that maybe sacrifice some depth here and there for this, I feel like just the stars are also just, so much better this year. Of course, you have some of the same names from last year that are still around in the Big 12, namely the guys that got injured in JT Toppin and Richie Saunders. But,
those are my top two picks for Big 12 Player of the Year last year, were those two guys. So, and they neither of them would have been, maybe Toppin would have been really close to he probably would have been on my ballot, but it's kind of like AJ DeBanza, Floyd Badunga, like these kind of guys that are really in contention this year. You could argue any of the Arizona guys. I would argue Braden Berries. You could argue Kingston Flemings. Like you said, the especially the freshman star power has really, really taken a leap forward this year. Yeah,
for sure. And that's like, I don't know, that's one of the crazy things is I mean, Buffs had Isaiah Johnson, and you see him doing what he was doing over the summer, and it was like, okay, they might have found they have some here. And then already at that time you could look around and be like, okay, well, Darian Pearson, Devonsa, Berries, Tunde Yusufu, and then it just kept going and going and going. And I didn't even mention Kobe Pete in that list. And so yeah, I mean, the star power on top of the guys that did return, Christian Anderson was another,
I mean, PJ Haggerty came into the conference at Kansas State. He's a multi-million-dollar transfer portal player. He's one of the leading scorers in the country.
Yeah, and you look at Oklahoma State, a lot of moves for them. Baylor was a team that was completely redone. UCF was a team that's completely well done, and
Cincinnati, West Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, all those teams in the middle look completely different, and in my opinion, in a good way. I think UCF, if I had to pick, I mean, they're seventh.
They're the biggest surprise, I think, to me, in a positive light.
Yeah, for sure, because they're seventh right now. So I mean, they're the easy pick to kind of pick as a surprise in the Big 12, a dark horse, if you will. But between, I mean, looking at their front court or their back court, excuse me, of Timus Fulks and Riley Kugel, I mean, they're something. They're special to watch, and no one's even thinking about UCF. And those two guys come in and see what they did to Colorado in Boulder, and you're like, wow, like these dudes are just special. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm answering your question exactly how you envision, but yeah, basically just this year I feel like the Big 12 has much more of an argument for being the best basketball conference in the nation, not only due to the depth but the star power jump as well.
All right, Oliver. Well, that's all I got for you today. I appreciate you hopping on the show once again. Maybe we'll catch up either before or during the Big 12 tournament, because like we said, it's gonna be a really fun one. I know for sure you'll be in KC kind of covering it all for Buff Stampede. So and I won't see you tomorrow at the Oklahoma State game, but I should see you next week at the Kansas State game in Boulder. So have a good one, man. Appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Tyler.
Yeah, as always. All right, that'll do it for today's episode of Basketball in the Mountains. Thanks again to Oliver Hayes from Buff Stampede and 247 Sports for joining us. And thanks to all of you for listening or watching wherever you do so. Make sure to subscribe to the feed, whether it's on Apple or Spotify. Leave those 5-star reviews as well. Or if you're watching over on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to my channel and leave a like on the video. All that stuff helps you get the videos and episodes out there to more and more people, which is ultimately the goal here as we're winding down in the regular season and heading towards March. So appreciate all